Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's Rseat is actually a repeat of one of the very best Rseats that we've ever gotten, but unfortunately, there's tuning this time around. Let's get into it. Once again, the anti-meta car of the week is the Corvette. Initially, I thought the Porsche was the meta car. It probably still is, considering it's competitive without a tune, but I was driving the Aston Martin thinking it was an anti-meta. It is way too fast. So I thought about the one weakness it does have, which is that top speed, and that's the same with the Porsche, and that's why I chose the Corvette. While there's no clear standout winner, I wanted to exclude any of the cars that I thought were extremely good. So no Vantage, no Porsche, no GTR, no McLaren, and instead I opted for the Corvette, which is usually just kind of a mid car, and because of its really awesome top speed, it can definitely hang with the other cars here. Firstly, I did not make this tune. This is actually copied from Digit's stream earlier. I'm going to link to his YouTube channel, but on top of that, he also has a website with a collection of settings and other useful stuff. You should definitely check it out. Big thank you to Digit. I really appreciate this tune. I've seen a lot of people go really wide to attack just the second kink. In reality, you just want to draw a tight line past both of the kinks on the inside right here. Approaching T1 is pretty tricky. What you want to do is look for this bollard right here, get as close as you possibly can to it, and turn in at that yellow point. Staying full throttle initially, you want to start lifting so you can get really close to the apex right here. Immediately get back on the throttle and continue turning towards the inside. You're going to brake right before the 100 meter board on the left. Continue steering slightly to the left as you stay on the brakes. So you're going to aim to put your left tires directly at where the green starts right here. Continue braking in a straight line, not turning in until you get past these marshals here on the left. Go down to first gear, continue turning in, staying full brake, and then start trail braking late into the corner so you can hit a late apex here. Back up to second gear and be very gentle on that throttle, but your goal is to get to full throttle as early as you possibly can. This is a good opportunity to talk about when to shift this car. You want to shift it right over where it has the suggested gear for each corner, and if you're not using this view, it's about 6,500 RPM. Try to memorize this line that we're using right here. You just want to go as straight as possible through here, and once you get the rhythm of it, it's not too tough. For the next braking zone, we're going to use all of the red and white curb. Initially, you're going to make sure that you don't run 4 tires over the green part, but when you get to the beginning of the red and white part of the curb, that's when you hit the brakes and then move entirely on it so only your right tires are on it. Turn early enough so that you don't go 4 tires past the curb, and then continue decelerating, getting all the way down to first gear just briefly before getting back up to second gear and getting on the throttle at the apex. Be very gentle. You can go up all the way on the curb right here, but if you're sliding at all, it's going to be really tough to keep control. Staying full throttle, turn in before the end of the curb on the left. Continue turning in full throttle, trying to match the tire marks, and right before you get to the BBS sign on the right, you want to start lifting, but only gradually. I used a little bit of brake, but if you just lift off the throttle sharper, you won't really need to use the brake. As I lift, I like to shift up to fourth gear before getting on the throttle, and we can draw a straight line through the grass right here. Staying just to the right of the middle of the track, when we get to the yellow part of the barrier on the left, we're going to turn in a lot more sharply. Combine a gentle lift of the throttle to get yourself as far to the right as you can without your left tires going over the white line. As soon as the front end of your car is in the tunnel, you're going to hit the brakes hard, switching directions, and immediately start trying to trail brake to trace a really tight line on the inside. I like to trail brake really gently and then get down to first gear, completely coming off the brakes, then immediately back on the throttle in second gear to stay as close to the line as we possibly can. You're not going to get full throttle until you can see exactly where you're going, trying to make sure that you don't hit this outside wall at all. Right before you exit the tunnel, aiming right about here, you're going to dip down to second gear, brake, and allow the car to rotate tightly into this left-hander. When the car starts to rotate, get back up to third gear, then gently get on that throttle. You want to continue steering left until we get to the beginning of the curb here on the right, then you're going to stay full throttle and switch directions. Your goal is to use as much of this curb as you can without touching any of these black curbing pieces. Lifting here is really important, so you don't have to lift too much again when you get back on the throttle after we've switched directions. The beginning of this brown fence on the right is a really good place to know when to switch directions. You want to turn in first, aiming for the curb, and then lift only as much as needed to get your left tires all the way up on the curb. Gently get back on the throttle and aim to make sure you don't go all the way over the grass right here. What you want to do is change directions at the last moment. If your left tires are loaded with the weight, then you don't have to worry about this curb upsettling you too much. If you nailed that last corner, you should be able to stay full throttle here, but if you don't, you might have to lift for that one. Right before the 50 meter board on the left, you're going to brake really hard, but then immediately start trail braking in. You want a late apex, but that does not mean you want to be super far away from the inside of the corner. Make sure you're really close the entirety of the way through, and then use the white patched portion of the asphalt to determine exactly where you want to dip down to first, apex, and then get back up to second, gently getting on the throttle to make sure that you don't under or oversteer towards the exit. This is a very important corner. You'll notice there's a tiny bit of AstroTurf past the curb. You can use that, but if you hit the real grass, it's going to suck you into the wall. From here, it's a straight shot to the end, but make sure you pay attention to exactly when you should be shifting the Corvette. Like I mentioned in the breakdown, the best way to take this first line is just to kind of hug both corners. You want to just draw one really tight line past both of those little kinks, and then just try to set yourself up to get as far to the right as you can before the kink to the left, leading into the really big braking section here. A lot of brake pressure is necessary here. There are two main things that can cause you to understeer a lot there. One is just carrying too much speed, so getting off the brakes too early, and two is actually slowing down enough, but also getting off the brakes too suddenly. You've got to make sure that you're really holding onto the brakes for as long as you can, without slowing down too much, of course, to make sure that you still have enough weight over the front tires to get it to rotate at that really slow speed. Make sure you take full advantage of all of that red and white curbing there on the left before in that last braking zone. You've got to get on the throttle, again, right before this crest, so if you're not aimed perfectly already, it's probably going to make you understeer into the wall back there. Going wide for this tight left-hander is just going to make you waste time, so just try to stay really, really tight on the inside, and then the same thing for this left-hander right here, but you don't want to delay this right-hander. You want to lift just briefly, and then the same thing with this left-hander. It's all about finding a rhythm and keeping up as much momentum as you possibly can throughout the entire final sector. And while this is a late apex, it's not the kind of corner where you want to be really far away from the inside at any point, so really just hug it throughout the entire way and try to just get up on that curb right before you get on the throttle. And once again, I urge you to pay attention to exactly when you should shift. This race is one of the few races that actually requires you to use a real pit strategy. You actually have to take care of your tires, so there is a pit window, but you can't just go in, pit, and not take tires. You do actually have to use both, partially because it's required, but partially because it's also necessary because you're going to end up running out of your softer tire compound. For this race, I use +5 on the brakes, and I also use default ABS instead of weak ABS. Much like most of the cars in this class right now, this car can take only 3 laps on the hards and the rest on mediums, but of course you're going to suffer a little bit in your medium pace towards the end of your stint. It's safer to do 4, 5, or even 6 or 7 laps on the mediums, but I do think that's excessive. I think 3, 4, or 5 is probably the sweet spot, probably the best pit window for you. If you're towards the front, it's definitely worth using the softer compound at the beginning sometimes, but it's also sometimes better just to use the harder compound because everyone else will be doing the same thing, and then you won't have to worry about having the disadvantage of using the softer compound at the beginning. One big disadvantage to using the softer compound at the beginning is you're not going to be quite as fast because you're going to have the extra fuel weight and your tires will also wear a little bit more. One could argue that it is evened out by the fact that you're going to have to go slower on whatever compound that you choose for the beginning of the race anyways, but in general, you find people going a lot faster when they start on the harder compound in Gran Turismo. Now, you may have noticed that coming. I saw it just a little bit too late, and I was hoping if I moved to the right and floor it, then I would be out of danger, but unfortunately that was not the case. Somehow I didn't go all the way to last place. I did get damage, but I decided to continue because, of course, it's only light damage in these daily races. Trying to look at the bright side of things, at least I had clean air and didn't have to worry about dirty air through this last sector because it is really tough. Make sure when you're racing really close to people, especially in the last sector, that you are aware that your car's not going to turn quite as good as it can in TT or just when you're driving by yourself. Initially, I thought I would take advantage of that and probably pit on lap 3 or 4 because I was going to be able to get clean air, or at least I thought. But unfortunately, we caught up to the next guy in line and he was 3.5 seconds ahead of us at the time, which means that we're 3.5 seconds faster than him per lap, and if I had to be stuck behind him even for a little bit, it could probably ruin my overall pace, so I decided to take the long shot and just go in the pits right now. Now, the Corvette is not very good on tires, but surprisingly right now with the current Bape, it's not bad. There's now a warning for which tires are mandatory if you're on the wrong tire compound, or if you just haven't used the mandatory tire compounds. That didn't used to be there, so sometimes it was really easy to make a mistake. You don't have to worry about refueling, but it is important to take note of how much the less fuel in the car affects the weight, and then that affects the handling as well as the tire wear. Coming out of the pits, we were introduced to the first bit of luck that we had experienced in the entire day, and so I had a solid 2.5 second buffer in front and behind, if not even more. I had clean air for almost an entire lap, and then I came to a Porsche coming out of the pits with another Porsche right behind, but I was very happy to see that one of them had a penalty. Be very careful when you're racing people that are coming out of the pits. A lot of them don't know exactly when to brake coming out of the pit, so you can see them making really weird decisions, and it's usually just a mistake, especially if you see someone else really close. We were really lucky, and Super Noob didn't get caught up with that guy, but I did think we were going to have to make a pass until he put on his blinker and just let me go. Now, there are situations where I don't know exactly why people are doing that. He might know who I am and think that it's best not to try to waste time battling me, or he might have also been paying attention to the fact that I was 3 seconds behind him only 1 lap ago, and it would be better off not battling me. If you are racing someone and you're giving your best and then you see them break 3 seconds leading up to you, it is definitely a better choice not to battle them. It's one thing if you're trying to have fun and just battle everyone, but the stark reality of it is that if someone is 3 seconds per lap faster than you, they're going to be braking and accelerating at completely different points and also using completely different lines, which means that your race against them is not really compatible. It's not necessarily going to be what you expect if you try to race someone who is that dramatically faster. I'm not trying to make Super Noob feel bad. In fact, I think it's really smart of him not to try to battle me. I assume that he knew that I was 3 seconds ahead just a lap ago, so I sent him a thanks, which is funny, it almost made me spin, but the lines that we take would be so dramatically different that it wouldn't even really be like a race. Now, like I mentioned in the lap before, it's really important when people are coming out of the pits to give them a little bit extra grace because, like I said, not a lot of people actually practice exactly when to brake when it comes to coming out of the pits. A lot of people can do it intuitively, but I've seen a lot of people who just completely blow that corner just because they don't know exactly when to brake. Now, I did not exactly recognize this guy, but I thought I'd raced against him, so I of course just gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I tried to pull off an outside move, and I was really happy with the fact that he did give me space, so shout out to that guy. Since he passed level 1 of the trust challenge, I gave him the trust to stay on the inside here, and he gave me all the space. It was beautiful. And then right here, we almost made contact, but not quite. It was just a really beautiful battle. I really appreciated driving against that guy. That is the kind of stuff that I absolutely love doing. When you know that you have similar pace to someone and you can give them a battle, give them all the space you can, drive hard, and it is absolutely the very best thing that you can do in racing. It's the best feeling, having a good battle with someone like that. I was also really glad to showcase that little battle as well as the previous couple of incidents, not incidents, but the previous interactions I had with Porsche drivers. I do think that the Porsche is the meta car here. I think the Aston can be just as fast with a tune, if not faster, but the Porsche, you don't even need a tune to be competitive here. With that said, the Porsche is much better known for its handling prowess, and so the fact that you're able to stay with one of them in a Corvette means a lot for this car as the choice for the anti-meta car. As you've probably been able to tell, the Corvette has a much higher top speed, so that definitely comes into play. Now, he did bump me. I braked about on time. He braked really late. There's a chance that he could have made that if I wasn't there, though, but it's really hard to tell. This is tough. It's not real life, so it doesn't really matter. I did get a penalty because of that, but I'm not going to retaliate against that guy or anything like that, especially considering the fact that we've had good driving before that. So that's okay. No harm, no foul. But with that in mind, I did want to get far enough in front of him because I had almost an entire lap, so I didn't have to worry about him passing. Not only do I have to be a half second ahead, I have to worry about the fact that I'm on the brakes for a half second, so it's more like a full second. So my goal right now became get as far in front of him as possible so that he can't even pass me on the straight. In about a half lap, I was able to put 6/10 on him, which put me just far enough, especially since I nailed that corner and didn't look like he did, that I was able to go through, serve my penalty, and I wasn't actually in danger of him passing me at all, which meant that I was going to be able to continue utilizing all of this nice, beautiful clean air. So now, in 8th place on lap 7, we jump to lap 14, and you can see I'm in 5th place. Using that reverse strat against people who are using the soft first strat is a massive, massive undercut, which means that you can pass people as long as you get clean air completely without ever having to race them because they're just running their race separate from you while still having to use the exact same regulations. Everyone has to go in the pits, everyone has to use both tire compounds, but if you're tricky with it and you can get clean air, then you can pass a lot of people without ever having to see them. Thank you all again very much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd like to just take a second to thank everyone who took a moment to comment on my last video. I didn't quite have the mental energy to reply to all of you, but I really appreciate it. It meant a lot. And let's finish up with shoutouts for all of my current members. Thank you guys. Thank you.